Hey guys, Nate the Film Nerd here. Today I'm going to be adding possibly a new series to this channel that I would like to call the Monthly Roundup. Basically, this is me talking about the movies that I've watched this month that I didn't do solo reviews on. And this is something I've been wanting to do for a while because I watch a lot of movies and not all of the movies that I watch warrant in-depth reviews. But I still want to talk about some of these movies in shorter segments, and I can do this with numerous movies, and so that's how I kind of came up with this idea. But whether or not this becomes a permanent series on this channel depends on you guys, whether or not you want to continue to see this content. So let me know in the comments below what you think of this video. But yeah, with all that being said, here's this little cute intro I made for the Monthly Roundup. So before I dive into the movies that I'll be talking about, this is not all of the movies I watched for this month. Like I said, I watch a lot of movies, but these are like 10 movies that I picked out that I did watch this month that I wanted to talk about because I think they're interesting in one way or another. So with all that being said, let's jump into the first movie that I watched of this month, which is Martin Lawrence's Blue Streak. This was actually the movie I watched right before I decided to do a revisit of Bad Boys, which was the last review I did for this channel. And the reason I wanted to watch this movie was because A, I had never seen it before, and B, Martin Lawrence is a bit of a blind spot for me in terms of his filmography. I didn't really grow up watching his movies. I didn't grow up watching his sitcom. I definitely grew up watching Will Smith, and I'm always on the lookout for new comedies. And that's one of the other reasons why I wanted to do this series on this channel, because a lot of comedies don't really warrant full in-depth reviews. It all basically boils down to, do you find it funny or do you not find it funny? So I'm always looking for new comedies to add to my rotation of rewatchable comedies. Unfortunately, I don't think Blue Streak is going to be one that's going to be included. I don't think this is a terrible movie, but to be honest, it didn't do a whole lot for me. The film revolves around Martin Lawrence's character, who is a burglar. And after he stores a diamond in this building, he goes to jail, comes back 2 years later, only to find out that the building has been turned into a police station. And so he has to pretend to be a police officer in order to get this priceless jewel that he's accidentally stored there. It's actually kind of a fun premise for a comedy. Unfortunately, this movie doesn't do a whole lot with it. It's basically just a vehicle for Martin Lawrence's particular brand of very broad, hyper silly comedy. Sometimes those comedies land with me. Sometimes they don't, and in the case of Blue Streak, unfortunately, it didn't really land with me. I kind of knew this movie wouldn't be for me pretty early on, where Martin Lawrence dresses up as this goofy character delivering pizza, wearing clearly fake hillbilly teeth in order to distract these real cops in order to get into the building. That was a moment that was just like, oh god, this is going to be a little bit tough for me to get into. I will say, the pleasant surprise that this movie did have was Dave Chappelle. I did not know he was in this movie, so when he popped up, I was like, oh, that's great. And it's early Dave Chappelle, too, where he has this high-pitched voice, and he has a lot of energy in the way he delivers lines. Even if it's not necessarily a funny line, he can make it funny just with his delivery alone. And so he was the best part about this movie, and he got the biggest laughs out of me. But everything else was very just kind of, pretty basic, and it wasn't the worst comedy I've seen. In fact, there are two other comedies that I watched that I'll be mentioning in this video that are two of the worst comedies that I've seen in quite some time. So Blue Streak is definitely better than those films I'll mention later, but yeah, this is probably one that I wouldn't return to. The next film that I watched was also a comedy starring Chris Rock. Now, I'm definitely more of a Chris Rock fan than I am of a Martin Lawrence fan. I'm a big fan of Chris Rock's stand-up. I actually think he's a really brilliant comedic writer. And the movie that I watched is called Head of State. This is a movie that he both wrote and directed. The idea is basically him, a black man, running for president. And it's a very satirical movie. And the reason that I wanted to watch this movie is because I saw a clip on Instagram of Nate Dogg singing the intro to this movie.
Here's a story about a man, a simple man, a man with a dream to do the world some good.
Now, I am a 90s hip hop fanatic. I love all things 90s hip hop, and I am just the biggest fan of Nate Dogg. Anytime that man sang a hook, it was an instant classic. So that alone made me want to watch this movie. I definitely enjoyed this movie a little bit better than Blue Streak, the previous comedy that I watched, but this one also didn't fully land with me. It is satirical, but it's also like really, really silly in kind of like a Airplane, Naked Gun type of way, which, by the way, I love those movies, but the gags in Head of State didn't really have the same level of creativity as the other parody movies that I've seen, the really good ones. But similar to that of Blue Streak, this movie did have another surprise element to it, and that is the great Bernie Mac. And he was absolutely hilarious. He plays Chris Rock's brother. He's going to be his vice president. There's a whole montage of him doing kind of like a press run, and absolutely hysterical, and Bernie Mac greatly missed, so he added a lot of enjoyment to the movie. But yeah, this is another one that was a bit too middling for me. I can appreciate its satirical edge, and I can appreciate its kind of fun concept, especially for the time. This movie came out during the Bush era. But it's another one that was just like, it's okay. I don't really need to see it again. Moving from pure comedies to action comedies, I decided to revisit a movie that I hadn't seen in years, and that is a movie called The Rundown. I remember really enjoying this movie when I saw it years ago, but it'd been so long that I forgot a lot about it. And rewatching it again, this movie is a lot of fun. I'm not a big fan of The Rock. To be fair, I haven't seen a lot of his movies, but I remember I tried to watch Red Notice one time, and I got like halfway through the movie, and I'm like, this movie is one of the most boring, lifeless pieces of shit I've ever seen in my life. There was something about it that was so offensive in how just dull it was. And I have a feeling that I would feel that same way about a lot of The Rock's current output of like blockbuster type of movies. I'm not really interested in seeing a lot of them. But this was before The Rock kind of became the star that he is now. This was early on in his film career. And basically The Rundown is like Midnight Run meets Raiders of the Lost Ark. Now, to be clear, this movie's nowhere near as good as those two classics. The idea is the character The Rock, he plays like this muscle man for this big gangster. He's ordered by his boss to go get his son, who's in Brazil, where his son is there to get this priceless artifact, and these two characters end up, kind of working together to get this artifact, as well as going against this evil village bad guy, which is Christopher Walken and all of his hooligans. And it's just a really funny, very efficient action comedy that has really good action, especially in the third act where it gets really crazy. And the comedy is really consistent and lands most of the time. It's pretty silly stuff, but the chemistry between The Rock and Seann William Scott, it works. These two characters do not like each other, and that adds a lot of great comedic elements to it. I love the adventurous tone, kind of in the spirit of Indiana Jones. And I like how the movie shifts from that adventurous tone to almost like a Western style tone with the final showdown in the third act. Just one of those movies that you would go into thinking that it would probably just be okay or not that great. And then you end up pleasantly surprised, like, damn, this is actually a pretty fun movie, very underrated film. So if you haven't seen this movie and you're a fan of adventurous action comedies, I highly recommend The Rundown. This is a good time. So the next film I'll be talking about was one that I was planning on doing a solo review on, but as I was doing my recording, I kept saying the same thing over and over again, which typically means there's not a lot to say about the movie. The movie I'm talking about is The Quest, both starring and directed by Jean-Claude Van Damme. I originally wanted to do a review on this and kind of be like a part 2 review of when I did Steven Seagal on Deadly Ground, which is a movie that he directed and starred in, and it was the only movie he directed. This is kind of the Jean-Claude Van Damme equivalent of that. But the problem with The Quest is it's not so bad it's good on a pure hilarious level like On Deadly Ground is. It's a kind of retelling or a reimagination of the movie Bloodsport. Basically, this movie stars Jean-Claude Van Damme in like the early 1920s, and he plays this character who starts off as this like street entertainer in the city of New York, helping orphan children steal money from gangsters. He ends up fighting some of the gangsters, and he's on the run, and then he ends up getting trapped on a pirate ship, and then Roger Moore's in this movie, and he ends up getting Jean-Claude Van Damme and putting him in this underground fighting ring. And the first 25 minutes of this movie is actually surprisingly pretty good. It's a lot of fun, kind of Spielberg-esque in terms of the lighthearted, adventurous tone that it was going for. But by the time you reach the midway point of this movie, it's just Bloodsport again. And it's not a better version of Bloodsport. For the record, I love Bloodsport. It's probably my first or second favorite Van Damme movie, with Hard Target being right there as well. But Bloodsport is a great schlock masterpiece. You don't really need to improve it. It's perfect for what it is, and it came out during the perfect time. And The Quest was like Van Damme wanting to like make a more epic version of Bloodsport, but it just ends up feeling like I've seen this before, and it's not as good as the other thing that I've seen. And it just kind of becomes very boring very quickly. I tried to do a single review of this, but it was basically me saying over and over again, first 25 minutes is good, then it's a boring version of Bloodsport. That's it. That's my review of The Quest. The next movie I'm talking about, another action movie, was another one that I was thinking about doing a solo review on, but once again, there's not a whole lot of things to go in depth with this movie. But it is a movie that I do like, unlike The Quest, and that is the movie Code of Silence. This was a movie that I was going to do in honor of Chuck Norris. Full disclosure, I have nothing against Chuck Norris personally. It's just that I'm not a big fan of him as an actor. I'm not a big fan of his action movies. Granted, I haven't seen all of them, but I've seen like Invasion USA, and I've seen Missing in Action, and I've seen fucking Sidekicks, and they're boring. The action is boring, very, generic 80s type of stuff. He's boring as a leading action man he doesn't just have zero charisma, he has like negative charisma. Like it's bizarre how much he shows no effort in trying to be a charismatic action star. But the thing is, that's interesting about Code of Silence is that this is by the director Andrew Davis, who's most famous for directing The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, an amazing movie. But he's also most famous for directing Under Siege with Steven Seagal. And both Under Siege and Code of Silence are directly connected because they both star bad actors, but the director is able to work around that and still make a compelling movie using the lead actor just as necessary to forward the movie along and get some fun action sequences in there. And that's why Code of Silence works. This movie has a very French Connection, Dirty Harry type of vibe, which, by the way, apparently this was written to be a Dirty Harry sequel that Eastwood passed on, but it ended up being bought by Orion, and they were like, hey, let's make this a vehicle for Chuck Norris, who was very popular at the time, despite the fact that he got zero good critical reviews, but fans really liked him. And the plot itself is very standard cop stuff, but it's directed really well. It has this gritty, almost 70s, like I said, French Connection type of energy. The movie is more grounded. It's more thriller-esque until we get into the last act of this movie where Chuck Norris teams up with a killer robot to beat up the bad guys, which is awesome and hilarious. And when there's action in this movie, which there isn't a lot of action in this movie, but the movie is still like, it moves at a good pace. It's actually a fun movie to watch, even if you're like me and you're not the biggest Chuck Norris fan. I think you can enjoy this movie on a, fun, dirty thriller type of vibe. And it's not an amazing movie, but it's one that I had a good time with, and that's because the direction by Andrew Davis is incredibly solid. So this one gets a thumbs up for me. All right, so like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there was a comedy that I watched that was horrific. And it is one of the worst comedies I've seen, maybe ever. And that is the movie Who's Harry Crumb, starring the great and lovely John Candy. So I wanted to watch this movie because I'm a John Candy fan. But as a fan of John Candy, there's only really 4 movies of his that I return to frequently. My Mount Rushmore, if you will. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Uncle Buck, Cool Runnings, and The Great Outdoors. To me, those are the top 4 most rewatchable and awesome John Candy movies. But to be fair, there's not a lot of his other movies that he starred in that I've seen, which is why I wanted to watch this movie. This movie apparently has a little bit of a cult following, but oh my God, this is one of the most painfully unfunny movies I've ever seen. There's not a single memorable or clever gag. It is all the most bottom of the barrel type of humor. And even John Candy, who is great in most things, cannot rise above the incredibly mediocre material he's given. His character is so annoying and is so much of an idiot that he's actually dislikable. Like, imagine that. Imagine making John Candy an unlikable character. Like, that's like, how do you even do that? But this movie does it. And as I was watching it, I was just like, oh God, this is like pulling teeth. Like the movie just got worse and worse. And like I said, it's all really uncreative, lowbrow, slapstick kind of comedy. I love good slapstick. The key word there is good. good slapstick. And I know when it comes to comedy, and I don't talk a lot about comedies on this channel because it's incredibly subjective. Either you laugh or you don't laugh. And I straight up just did not laugh while watching this movie. It was just so bland and painfully stupid. But as I was watching it, it did remind me of another movie that I hadn't seen in a really long time. I'm like, you know what? Let me watch a better movie that has a kind of private investigative type character who's actually funny and also wears disguises and can make good comedy out of it. This movie made me rewatch Fletch, kind of like the Chevy Chase movie in terms of his particular brand of really dry, sarcastic humor. And I know some people really don't like Chevy Chase, not just him as a person. Obviously, he's very notorious for being a bit of an asshole, but there are people who just never loved his comedy. I'm a big Chevy Chase fan. I grew up with the Vacation movies. Christmas Vacation in particular is maybe the most rewatched movie of my lifetime because my family watches it every year during the holidays. But I really like his brand of humor, and Fletch is just, 90 plus minutes of Chevy Chase being Chevy Chase. And if you like that type of dry, sarcastic humor, it's really, really funny. And it's a really breezy movie that actually has a compelling mystery story. The story that Fletch is trying to investigate is actually pretty interesting, unlike Who's Harry Crumb, which is like, you don't give a shit about what's going on at all because the humor is just so stupid. Fletch is the opposite of that. The humor I really respond to. I really like dry comedy. And I liked the story, and it's just a really easy movie to watch. It's not a masterpiece. I don't think it's his best movie. Like, if I had to pick his best movie, it's somewhere between Vacation and Christmas Vacation. But Fletch is definitely a really fun time, and I'm glad that I rewatched it because it'd been so long. So I still really enjoy it. Shifting from comedies back into really schlocky action, I decided to revisit the canon classic American Ninja. I remember watching this movie years ago when I was a kid, when I was really getting into like ridiculous ninja movies. American Ninja is kind of one of the classic ninja movies of the 80s. It's one of the most famous ninja movies that Canon did outside of their Ninja trilogy, if you're familiar with those films. It's not a good movie, but it's an entertaining movie. It's a movie that's 90 minutes long. It's a movie that knows exactly what it is, which is Michael Dudikoff, which, by the way, similar to that of Chuck Norris, has no personality or charisma, but it has a lot of fun action sequences. And this movie fully delivers on giving you a ton of ninja shit and a ton of ninjas getting beat up, stabbed, shot at. We even get some awesome bazooka action in the final act. Like a good Canon movie, it's quick, it's dirty, it's efficient, it's cheesy, a perfectly serviceable, schlocky, lazy afternoon type of movie on a Sunday where you got nothing going on. Fun movie to have on in the background, so I had a good time with it. And ending this video, I'll be talking about my accidental double feature of Chris Evans movies, starting with Not Another Teen Movie. So here's the thing. I actually really love good parody movies. Like I mentioned earlier, I love Airplane. I love the Naked Gun movies. I love the Hot Shots movies, especially. I love Black Dynamite, which for my money is probably the last truly great spoof movie. I mean, that movie is just a masterpiece of really silly spoof comedy. But I'm always on the lookout for more, which I don't think there's a ton of good ones, especially when we get into the early 2000s or later 2000s with the whole epic movie and disaster movie, and like those movies totally ruined the genre. But Not Another Teen Movie came out during that time where I think the first two scary movies were already out. But yeah, this movie's bad. It's really, really quite stupid. I like the idea behind this movie. I like the idea of making fun of all of these like kind of classic teen comedies from the John Hughes era all the way to the American Pie era. There's a lot of material to work with here, and this movie does comment on some of those funny tropes, like the nerdy girl who wears glasses, who's super unattractive, but when she takes her glasses off, she's super hot, even though when she had her glasses on, she was already hot before. There's kind of a funny gag with that. But outside of that, this movie was definitely a sign of what was going to happen with the epic movies and the disaster movies. It's not quite on that level of stupidity, but it's pretty damn close. But I will say Chris Evans does fully deliver being kind of a funny, goofy leading man. Kind of reminded me a little bit of like Val Kilmer in Top Secret. Nowhere near as good as that, but I think Chris Evans actually was pretty good in this movie, despite the fact that he had not really that much good material to work with. But yeah, this is a very bottom of the barrel spoof movie. that is not that creative, not that original with its gags, and at times so sleazy that it's actually kind of uncomfortable a little bit. So yeah, this is definitely not one I'll return to. But the next Chris Evans movie that I watched, and like I said, I did not plan this, is a movie that I've been meaning to watch for a while because I like finding kind of the obscure comic book movies that nobody really talks about anymore. And that is a movie called The Losers. Funny enough, this movie came out in 2010, which I believe was the same year that Captain America came out. Actually, I'm looking it up now. I stand corrected. It came out the following year in 2011, but they were very close together. So The Losers is based off a DC Vertigo comic that I have not read, but apparently is pretty good. So I have no idea if this movie is an accurate representation of the source material. All I know is that this was dumb, but it was fun. It's got Jeffrey Dean Morgan and Idris Elba and Zoe Saldana, as well as Chris Evans. We also get Jason Patric from The Lost Boys as the bad guy, which, by the way, he's not good in this movie. I mean, his performance and his character is so bad. But outside of that, this is actually a pretty fun action movie. Similar to that of American Ninja, it gives you all the things that you would kind of want to see in this type of movie. It sets the tone pretty early. The action is quick and dirty. It gets increasingly more insane as we get to the final act. The chemistry between our gang of misfits characters who, an unlikely team of characters. It kind of reminded me of the Suicide Squad, the good one, the James Gunn one, which Idris Elba is also in. It kind of has that type of vibe. The plot is very generic, nothing all that original, but the movie has a certain attitude that's kind of fun once you kind of get into it. Chris Evans is really funny in the movie. He's got a lot of memorable scenes. If you go into this movie expecting just really dumb but fun, over-the-top action, you're going to have a good time with it. If you're going to get nitpicky about, the cliches and the plot inconsistencies, and I will say kind of a legitimate complaint is that this movie does end on somewhat of a cliffhanger with the bad guy, Jason Patric, and that's kind of annoying because obviously this movie did not get a sequel. But other than that, this is, once again, similar to that of American Ninja. This has lazy Sunday afternoon vibes written all over it. I had a pretty good time watching it. Would I ever rewatch it? Probably not, but as I was watching it, it was pretty fun. So anyway, guys, that was the first episode of the monthly roundup. Please let me know if you want to see more content like this in the comments below. And don't worry, I'm planning on doing more solo reviews in the future. But yeah, this is something I wanted to try out. But yeah, thank you for watching.